Should be good to go.
View slide
Uh,
tools edit. Come on. View slideshow. Does that look okay?
Yep,
Yeah.
looks great.
All right. Welcome to this month's Nebraska Iowa MUFON meeting. MUFON's all about the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. It's the world's oldest and largest UFO phenomena investigative body. We aim to be the inquisitive mind seeking answers to the most ancient question, are we alone in the universe? This was supposed to represent the UNO with the clock tower and stuff, but it did, and a UFO outside, but it didn't quite get the clock tower right.
Looks good though.
Yeah.
yeah, I think you can add the picture in to kind of help it, figure out what to do. So,
I did add a picture in and it still wanted to use it just didn't, even when I told it that was the clock tower, it still didn't.
worth a try.
All right. The Nebraska team's made up of Kyle Finley, State Director, Fred Zewe, Assistant State Director, Tamara Steyer, Chief Investigator, John Barta, Field Investigator, Maxwell Hobbs, Field Investigator Trainee, Dave Paris, Consultant, and Dr. Jack Casher, Consultant. The Iowa team's kind of dwindling, but it's made up of myself, State Director, Dave Kreider, Chief Investigator, Beverly Moore, Field Investigator, and Keen Tiedemann, Field Investigator. So if hopefully we don't get hopefully we do get a bunch of cases, but we'll be short on people to show them. Are the yearly totals for the year? I had seven, and we had seven right off the bat in January and stuff, and haven't had any since. And Nebraska's had two, and you can see that Nebraska two is split between one in January and one in February. Here's our numbers from last January for the attendance, 21 there. Here's the statistics from MUFON. We're ranked 30th and Nebraska was 32nd. The important thing is that we're all still at 100% of our cases getting finished in a timely manner. MUFON News. Dave McDonald. Let's go to let me get that out of the way. He says, greetings, fellow investigators and enthusiasts, as we embark on February, a month often associated with love and renewal. Let us also embrace a renewed sense of curiosity and a dedication to the pursuit of truth within the field of UAP research. Said this month, I encourage all MUFON members to engage in local chapter activities, participate in meetings, presentations, and field investigations, share your knowledge, learn from others, and build strong connections within the MUFON community. Contribute to Citizen Science Report any potential UAP sightings through the MUFON reporting system. The CMS, your observations are invaluable to our collective understanding in this phenomenon. Stay informed. Keep abreast of the latest research, developments, news articles, and scientific publications related to unidentified aerial phenomenon. February presents an opportunity for us to collaborate with other organizations that seek partnerships with academic institutions, government agencies, and other research groups to advance our knowledge of UAP and the phenomenon's interaction with our world. To promote public education, engaged in outreach activities to educate the public about UAP and the importance of responsible reporting, advocate for the transparency, continue to push for government candor and honesty, and release all of the declassified information related to UAP. Speak out. And let us approach this month with a spirit of open-mindedness, scientific rigor, and an unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth about this aerial mystery. Together, we can make significant contribution to the groundswell of new important research and investigation uh, now underway. Oh, and don't forget to recognize your Valentine trust, and I will make it you do a lot smoother. All right. Here's cases to review here. And Dave, you want to go ahead with your cases? And
Absolutely. Greg, do you want to put up that first image? Yeah. Okay, this is Highway 150 in sort of north central northeast Iowa. And this highway connects Independence, Hazelton, and Olwine. And I've had just really not only a lot of cases, but real quality cases, with really good witnesses and so on in these three towns. And when I was investigating this particular case and I contacted the witness, I told him that, I had a lot of cases in this area. And he said, do you suppose it's because of the power station in Hazelton? And there's this enormous power station just outside of Hazelton where these wind turbines, they feed into that. There's a lot of wind turbines up in
oops.
that area. No, go back. Yeah, just keep on that for a while.
Yeah.
And so, and I said, you know what? Actually, I said, one of my best cases was in Hazelton, where a family of four saw a white egg-shaped UFO going up, traveling along the top of one of the uh, electric electric towers, electric lines, I should say. And it was in broad daylight, and these four witnesses, man, woman, and their two children. It was the children that spotted it first, and they alerted their parents. And so he pulled into the driveway where the power station is, and he also saw it, both he and his wife. And he reached into his car to get his camera, but by that time it was too late. But I just thought that was a really good case. Anyway, this case is from Olwine, and on January 10th of this year, at approximately 4:40 p.m., this Olwine witness was headed south in Olwine on Highway 150, and he observed a large object in the sky with two white inset lights connected by a thin silverish gray bar. But he believed that the object was circular. And there's a couple different times during this case where I was going to complete it as information only because it was so hard to get a hold of this witness. And when I did, I wouldn't hear from him again for, 6 or 7 days. And it's real sporadic, but I finally did get a phone call. And he believed that the object was about 1,000 feet in distance, and the size was about 150 to 200 feet in circumference. And as I said, he described the object he saw as a long, thin rail with downward pointing louvers on the end, but believed that the object was circular as other parts of the object became visible through the cloud cover. And when it disappeared in the sky, it left sort of an arc. And so, Greg, next image. And so I asked him, I always like to get a sketch or a photo or something. And he sent me this. But remember, he said it was circular in shape. So I did my own impression of what I thought it could look like. Next image. So I don't know, it could have looked something like this, maybe not, but And in his report, he initially thought it was on January 13th. But when I checked the weather for the 13th and the 14th, both evenings were fair. And remember, he said it was cloudy. So I asked him, I said, could it have been on January 12th because it was cloudy on that evening? And he said, no, because that was a Sunday, and I know I was coming home from work. So he thought about it for a while and came back and said, I think it was January 10th. And I checked the weather for that evening, and sure enough, it was cloudy on that evening. So I then asked the witness where the object was in relation to his position and what direction it was moving. And he said it was a bit east of the highway and it's moving south. But he only saw it. The duration of the sighting was really less than a minute. So I did check Flight Radar 24, and there was nothing really that would account for what he saw. Very, very little. There was one tiny aircraft, single engine that was headed north, but nothing that would have, been what he saw. And so I couldn't really find anything else, so I had to put this down. I gave this case a disposition of unknown UAV. Any questions? Okay. All right. That's it for my cases for the
All
week.
right.
Yeah.
Well, my case was Minneapolis, Iowa at 7 o'clock on February 21st of 25. And I identified it as an IFO. Essentially said a pair of lights evenly spaced, maybe 10 sets total, very low and no sound, biggest object I've ever seen. And my synopsis was right away, I recognized this as a Starlink satellite launch, where they launch them in pairs and they space them out in pairs and then they go into a single line eventually and then go to a higher orbit. So I did this as a rapid close case, and that's the first time I've used rapid close in the CMS. But anyway, the witness detail was when I first seen it, I thought it was some kind of big string of light strung in a tree in our neighborhood. Then I realized that it was moving. It flew directly over me. I was fumbling for my phone to get a video of it, and in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The only reason I know it was big is because it was blocking the stars behind it. It was gigantic. It was at least the size of an aircraft carrier. I don't even know how to put into words of how low it after it disappeared. I started obviously looking for it again and noticed how many planes and other lights were circling the area, which is pretty unusual for where we live. And I don't know the shape, but the lights were in a perfect straight line, and there was sets of them evenly spaced with big gaps in between each set of lights and made no sound, was moving very slowly at first and then gone. I mean, at first blush, you'd think there's a little bit of stuff in there that doesn't indicate that it's Starlink. But yeah, I did all the research I needed to do on Starlink launches and found that that was indeed the case for Starlink. So I identified it as an IFO. Any questions? Okay. Fred.
Yay. Alrighty. I guess I'll be on the set here for a little bit. I got quite a few cases here that I asked Greg that I could talk about because as the one case I had was with Esteban, which was a while back. Back on January 16th, I spoke with him. But then I had a case in Iowa that was Dave's Kreider's in of a ERT case, and I spoke with her. And then I had another case down in Oklahoma, Megan, and both these gals. I just found out, even Esteban, he was kind of not wanting to talk about his sighting, or more so his ERT type case. He saw a little gray, and when he was young, and so everybody kind of comes around, and both I think in Dave's case and the one I had down in Megan, they were both very shocked and very disturbed by it, and things of that nature. So I thought I'd bring a little bit more insight to these experiences, and how it affects the individual. I mean, a lot of times it affects them for a lifetime, on how they see things in life and things of that nature. So I thought I'd put a little more time and effort into that. All right, here comes case 140602. And you can go ahead, Greg, and hit my first slide. As you can see, this is case 140602. And I had a conversation with Esteban on 1/6/25, and the event date was September, October, or late September, early October. He didn't have the actual date of 23. As you can see here in the map, that right there on the tab is where Esteban works, and it's about 3/4 of a mile to the front edge of the northwest part of Offutt Air Force Base. So you can see it's fairly close, and that kind of plays into. So just assume that he said the craft was coming from the west and going southeast, kind of like he said that basically was moving like typical aircraft coming that land and take off, and but it was much closer. And I'll continue to read on my forum here. I said I received an email from MUFON on January 16th this year, and that the witness was from Bellevue. In fact, he lived just down the road from me. So I decided to take the case since it was in my neighborhood, and there was another triangular sighting which I found interesting, since I've had two other triangular craft sightings where all three of these sightings are within 1.5 miles from another, and then within a 2-year period. Then all of these sightings were close to Offutt Air Force Base. I have another triangular sighting which I observed in Lincoln in the same time frame, which I'll talk about later. All right. So I sent out an email message and text message to Esteban, and he responded almost immediately, stating that, in fact, that I got back to with him quite quickly. He said we then set up a meeting place at the local Runza restaurant down the road from where we are on Highway 370. And we had a 2 to 3 hour chat and talking about everything under the sun. Though we found out that he had read many philosophical books and spiritual books, along with other UFO books, which one book by Chris Bledsoe, UFO of God, which I've read also, and I felt Chris Bledsoe is one of the newest ET type book, abduction. And I do believe that this is what motivated Esteban in writing his report to MUFON, along with his encounter of an ET gray when he was around the age of 8 and 9 years of age. I said, I found Esteban to be very open once we got to know each other, and gaining some great rapport with him. He told me that his father was a Christian minister. Thus, I knew that I was in good hands with this young man, and he would be telling me his truth on both his sighting and his ET encounter. Again, it was a very enjoyable conversation interview with the witness at the Runza Bellevue on Highway 370, just west of 25th Street. Witness was very polite and consistent with his thoughts and views, and was highly interested in finding out more about the UFO ET topic. Esteban told me that he graduated from Bryan High School here in Omaha in 2015, and graduated from UNO with a BA degree in exercise science in 2020. Presently, he works for OPBD and under their tree service department. Again, the witness was very open and truthful in what he had, in that he and his fiancée, when they were out on the western deck, I think you can slide to the next slide there, Greg. This is an overview of where Esteban lives, and you can see on the left side of the house, in the center house, is a deck, and that's where Esteban and his fiance were sitting and observing. It was around 10 o'clock that evening. So, and he wanted to make sure, and he was very open and truthful about that he and his fiance had smoked some cannabis earlier that they'd relax on that evening. That he had become engaged to his fiance less than 2 weeks prior, and thus was sitting outside the porch, which they do quite often with their skywalk watching. And Esteban and his fiance, they almost have a passion about sky watching, so they do this quite often. Witness stated it was a chilly night, mostly clear skies with a few clouds seen. Witness stated it was cool enough that they had blankets around them while he stated his fiance was sitting on his lap and being closer and connected to her. And the reason why that's why he left his cell phone in the house. He says he always has a cell phone. It seems like a lot of cases they always have the cell phone, but for some reason they leave it. Especially on another one of my other cases, she had probably the most profound triangular crafts, and she left her phone home. She says, "I never leave the phone," and that time she did. So then the witness said it was cool enough that they had blankets around him, and while the fiance was sitting on his lap, he figured the temp to be around the upper 50s. Witness stated it was around 10 p.m. when they were out on their porch and they were out watching for some 30 to 45 minutes prior to observing the triangular craft, which caught his attention to the western direction at a 3 o'clock position. Next slide, please, Greg. As you can see, this is the front of the house, and you can see the trees. And so the deck was behind the center house there with a white frame around it on the windows. So at this time, the craft was coming to the right, moving across from to the right to the southeast. So we're looking southeast or southwest, looking at the house, and then east is to the left and west to the right, and directly behind the house is to the south. He stated instantly he felt that this was a totally different craft he's ever seen, and knowing that they are only 3/4 of a mile from the northwest corner of the Offutt Air Force Base runway. Witness stated that there was no sound, no lights, no emission with this very triangular craft that glided smoothly and very close to them, saying that he could have thrown a football at it and have hit it. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. And this is the craft. He kind of drew a real quick graph drawing of it. Esteban told me that his fiance said it was long or longer than a football field. I asked the witness, since he knows of the aircraft station at Offutt, the RC-135 Boeing 707 and the E-4B 747, how much larger was the craft to these United States Air Force craft? He stated that approximately 1.5 to 2 times the length of the E-4B, which is the presidential plane, the 747, and that all 3 sides were straight without any curves, cuts, much like the larger Air Force bombers. The only thing different he noticed about the craft was that it had an inverted concave center dome-like circle within the craft, and that it had lit up a bit more with light, much more brighter than the dark-colored smooth surface of the craft. Witness stated that they observed the craft for no more than 3 seconds prior to it disappearing behind the tree and the houses, which were now at the slightly left at 12 o'clock straight ahead. Witness stated that they were outside for another 10 minutes and came back inside thinking what they had just observed. Witness stated that he was inside the house. He went right onto the internet to see if he could find an aircraft similar to what he had just observed. He thought it would look like the TR-3B, but not quite. He stated again that he didn't hear any sound. Again, no sound, no lights, and no emission that it had. And it was very close to him. He again stated that it was right off the normal, landing pattern, much closer to them than the other aircraft observed. Witness finds himself puzzled in exactly what he observed that evening, knowing that it was a highly strange incident and the craft was very different than any other United States Air Force craft. All right, this was, again, I find that since it was this craft was in between the normal landing pattern more closer to his house, that and then no lights, I found that how could this be any sort of other aircraft? I would assume that any other aircraft coming and going would have the lights on it. And Esteban says, "I'm so close to the base," I says, "I can't not not hear the aircraft." But this one came in silently. But he said he just caught it by when something caught his attention and then he saw it. So again, this is probably a little bit lower. Again, as it landed or as this one flew by, and of course he didn't get to see it. It just continued on. So I kind of eliminated any sort of other aircraft because any other aircraft landing that off it would have landing lights and you could probably hear it. And I kind of got a feeling that this, again, a lot of these, I'll talk more about these other triangular craft. I said, is this craft kind of a screen memory, and I remember having a screen memory of my own of a craft when I was working on the railroad back in the days, and but I had this energy come over the top of me, and I through the higher state of consciousness, I was probably the only one that was able to see it. And there was a circular, probably a 30, 40-foot silver round craft that was semi-embedded in the clouds and also had some communications with the craft itself saying that we just want to let you know that we're here. And again, Esteban was in that same heightened state when I observed my sighting, and maybe the cannabis helped him see this as well. Do anybody have any questions on this sighting? I put this as a UAP unknown because I didn't foresee it as any other craft as possible, and that it could even have been a screen memory, but he saw what he saw. Any other questions on the sighting part? Nope. All right. So, next slide there, Greg. So then I was talking with Esteban. He mentioned that he had an incident when he was 8, 9 years old, and while he was sleeping on the couch. And this is his testimony. Says one night when I was 8 and 9 years old, while sleeping on the couch of our home, I felt a hand touch my left temple of my head. The sensation was so clear, it woke me up from my sleep. My father had the habit of praying for me in the middle of the night. And again, his father was a Christian minister, so he said this was very normal for him. And that it wasn't strange to wake up with his hands on my head or on my back. It's what I expected to see. At that moment, I opened my eyes and looked towards the kitchen, which had a small wall on the right side that divided the stairs going up and into the kitchen. On the left was a small peninsula that separated the kitchen and the dining room. Behind the wall on the kitchen side, I saw what looked like a long, slender arm retracted, and behind the hand, I saw what I could see only describe as a gray alien, bigger eyes than normal, all black and with a small head and a slender-looking body. Once our eyes met, it disappeared behind the wall. I remember getting up as fast as I could to investigate, to just find where I found nothing had been disturbed and where I saw that thing. I walked into the bedroom, which was right next to the kitchen, and looked around trying to look for it and look for anything that could confirm that what I saw. I stood there for a moment and I wondered if I could have been dreaming. The distance from my head to the couch to the wall seemed to be long enough for an arm to reach, which also made me doubt. I do remember the sensation of waking up between the time of it and getting up, but it didn't feel like a dream. One of the memories was that it has never gone away like many other dreams do. I tried to lean on the side of a dream since it was so out there, but something that I don't ever expect to forget. So Esteban's encounter of this entity, he said he woke up twice, which I found kind of interesting. He said as I got to talking with him even more, and that he said he woke up twice, which I find very unusual. And then he said that the first time I woke up, it was very dark in the room, and when he woke up the second time, there was light, like light coming in from the morning light. And so I'm going, I kind of got a feeling that this was possibly an encounter when he got touched on the forehead. And I just happened to read Dr. Greer's one of his talks on recently, and Dr. Greer talked about one of his encounters, and he said that he too saw a craft, and then all of a sudden he saw an entity come towards him. Well, this entity was a deer standing up on his legs, and the deer kind of walked up towards him, but then the deer disappeared, and then all of a sudden he felt something touching him on the shoulder or on his right arm, where he actually saw the coat that he's wearing push in where he was being touched. After that, he instantly remembered being up on the craft and then seeing the grays and so forth. So I took that as, some of the other experiences, people being touched. This is a common scenario. And then in Esteban's case, he felt the touch on his forehead as if to awaken him. And I felt that too, and Esteban thought too that this gray he was there long enough to recognize him, and he wanted to stay there long that he would recognize Esteban. And so once they met, that's what he wanted, and that was enough. So the ET left. So I've got a feeling that there was the first time he was again being touched, and the first time of waking up was that it was dark, that they took him, that there was an abduction that happened. And then they had the abduction, then they brought him back where he woke up again, with the touch. I kind of think of the ET film with the finger. The finger is always kind of luminescent and light that they, being touched, But then the room was much lighter, so I have a feeling there was a time span between the first time when he woke up and saw it was very dark, and now the second time is much, much brighter. So I feel there was a possible abduction there, and then again, the ETs always want to remind you of something that he was taken at this 8-9 years of age. That's something that he could remember from, and so I feel that from that aspect that he was taken. And I'll just kind of read the synopsis of what I had on. He said, I will say that in this present MUFON case that the witness had an ET gray encounter when he was 8 years old. He stated that when he woke up twice, he observed the grave hiding but looking out behind the near side of the kitchen. Witness said he felt that if the gray knew, again, the witness said that he felt that the gray knew he wanted him to see and remember what he observed that morning, that of the gray being. I find that in the most, if not all, your cases, the witness has had early ET encounters and that they remember or not, that if they don't come to understand their connection and ET experiences from their dreams, that they will have other continuous external observations of ET crafts. So the craft that Esteban and his fiance saw, again, it's kind of like, to me, is like a trigger, like, hey, here I am, it's kind of like wake it back up that you've had some ET type experiences, and so that's why I kind of say this could have been a screen memory or that came flying by and saying, hello, Esteban, we're here, and just for you to wake up to and put more attention to the gray that was right there as shown. So then this forces the witness to deal with something not normal, in that it will trigger the witness in looking into what they just observed. Much of the witness and others, they reach out to MUFON and finding and asking questions to UFOs and the ET encounters. In this case, the witness definitely felt that this was of high strangeness of this event with this encounter of the triangular craft, which prompted the witness to eventually reach out to MUFON. Witnesses also told me that he had read Chris Bledsoe's UFO book and thought that this gray encounter and the recent observation of this bizarre incident with the triangular craft were related, which I will say as an ET experience myself, yes, that they were both related as to spark or trigger the witness in coming to know more. Thus, I believe the craft was observed by was a UAP or a UFO, since it was so close to proximity. And again, when you have such close encounters where he said I could throw a football at it, that these are actual experiences, and that it was another clue for this, again, to be another clue to it being a UFO, ET UFO. Thus, in my case, the disposition for case 1406 was that of an unknown structure, and I had said the same thing as his ET connection, was that he had enough markers and things that happened with him with this encounter that I said it was suspected as a ET abduction. All right. So let's go ahead with the next slide there, Greg. Since I don't have the pointer, this, as you can see on the right-hand side where Greg is, that's where I had the talk with Esteban that runs the restaurant. And over by Bellevue, over on the bottom part, was another sighting over here where it says Bellevue, Greg.
Right here.
Right there. There's a set of apartments, which I will talk about Kyle's experience. He had a sighting there. And then if you move to the left, and there's a round circle right there. Keep moving. There's that round circle right there, right? See the right circle there?
Yeah.
And just to the left of the circle, there's a called Robin Wake Elementary School. And that's where this other gal, her name is Susan. She had a triangular craft scene there. And then, of course, Esteban was up by the Light Activity Center, was where he saw it. So you can see these three sightings were very, very near to each other. And again, I kind of had an overview of Offutt Air Force Base where the aircraft take on and off, where Esteban was up here on Highway 370 by the Light Activity Center, right in the center of the picture there. Esteban lives just to the left of that, about 3 or 4 blocks, right around that area. And then, of course, so he's in the pathway of the jet, so he could hear the aircraft, see the aircraft, but the one he had. So I'm assuming that the aircraft was closer to 370 here, which is the roadway going east to west, and then there's Highway 75 going north to south. So it evidently was coming across this way between the end of the runway and where Esteban and Highway 370, which again is 3/4 of a mile. All right. Next slide, please, Greg. All right, this case is 128977. The date was 2/17/23 with the, and this is case by Susan. And Susan had a sighting there at, as you can see, Wake Robin School. And straight across is a cul-de-sac. And that's exactly where the triangular craft was that she came down Casio. If you go north, there's Casio Drive. She came down heading south and stopped at the stop sign and took a right-hand turn and came down to Robin Wake School right at that intersection. I'll just read my little introduction here. Again, the witness is going to pick up her grandson who was at Bellevue East practicing with the marching band. The witness left from their residence driving east on Casio Drive when just prior to stopping at Lincoln Road, where she saw some lights above the trees. Thinking it was a helicopter, she stopped at the stop sign, turning right onto Lincoln Road, drove south and stopped the road at the intersection of Bruce Circle, where she observed the triangular craft above the street lights at the treetop level. Next slide, Greg.
Oops. Oops. There it is.
Yeah. Okay, this is looking south. This Lincoln Road is kind of going south, and she was coming up Casio right here on the bottom center. And while she was back here, back by this house on the Casio, she saw the lights down there down by Wake Robin. She thought they were emergency lights, but she thought there was a helicopter, but they were extremely bright, she said, extremely bright. She said when the witness was driving east on Casio, observing lights on the treetop level to the southeast, some 150 feet prior to stopping at the stop sign, she turned right, heading south, and drives to the entrance of Bruce Circle, stops in the road. She stops in the middle of the road and observes the stationary triangular craft has white and red lights on the bottom of the craft, and the craft was just located above the street lights. Next slide, Greg. So here she is stopped, and to the right is Wake Robin Elementary School. And she said the craft was just above the light there, as you can see the overlight, and the distance between the road going in is 24 feet. So she said the craft was about 50 feet, so it oversected up just above the street light there. And it was just sitting there very nonchalantly. And it just stayed there for about the 5 minutes she observed the craft. She said there was a car that came up behind her while she was there, and she rolled her window down, and she stuck her finger out the window, her arm out the window, and pointed up to the craft. And I asked her, "Did you see anybody in the car behind you?" She said, "No," but she just sat there and was rather disturbed that, So I was I was like, well, if the car came up behind her and stopped, I was wondering if that was another part of a screen memory, like where did she see any people in the car? And she said no. So I found that very, very strange. So then John Barton and I had a personal interview with these folks, and she drove us around to the various sites that she had, which I found very, very fascinating. Is there go to the next slide, Greg. Okay, and then this is where I asked the witness whether she had any other dreams or strange experiences in her earlier years as a child. She said that she did when she was 8, and she remembers a time when she was going to bed and sleeping, that she remembers seeing these shadow-like beings in the room. She stated she was awakened by this noise, and then she saw the shadow beings. She then stated when she was about 15, she saw another non-human being that was up in the ceiling corner of her room, that this entity, which had appeared to her, had a crown on its head. She did say that she had experience of sleep paralysis. These, I find, are often markers of having some sort of ET experiences. So once again, she was there at, go back to the one slide, Greg. So here she is. She's sitting in her car. The car came up behind her, and she stayed there for about 5 minutes and observed the craft. She was very observant, and she later decided to drive. After the 5 minutes, she drove off and to go pick up her grandson at the Bellevue East High School. Well, she drove back and she kind of went around and asked the neighbors if they saw anything, which is quite. And then she even called the Wake Robin School the next morning to see if anybody had seen the craft. Once again, she didn't have her cell phone with her, but I felt that this craft was there, just levitating over the top of the street light and never moved. And she said there were several lights, one red and one white. I mean, she said there was like three. The lights were in the corners of each of the triangular craft. So I actually feel like she said the three lights bulged, protruded outward from the craft and were approximately 3 feet in diameter. He said the ends of the craft were not rounded, but oops, excuse me. That was not Maryland's case. Okay. Anyway, any other questions on this? Any other information you want on this case that you thought about it? I think, again, this is another case just like Esteban's that people have these experiences of triangular craft. And this woman was in her early 70s. To have this really fabulous, I said, this is extraordinary type of case of having a craft just sitting there. And then she sat there for 5 minutes. Again, that car could have came up and she felt more relaxed when the car came up, like somebody else saw it. I just saw, well, I asked these, I think Esteban may want to be regressed sometime down the future. And again, these people didn't really have any belief patterns with whether they are real or not. Esteban was more, he's not in the woo-woo factor. He said, I'm more science oriented. And that was another one of the things. She saw actually, the craft was always stationary. It didn't move. It just very stationary. Thank you for the questions. And so I found that, again, you don't have these type of experiences that close if you haven't had some sort of other encounter or other abduction, should I say, as well. And that's why I asked, and I wasn't even in the ERT group at that time, and I asked the witness what she had any other stories of in which she did. So I find that she had some ET experiences, and the craft was there again. Knock, knock, knock. It's like a little trigger to say you need to look at your experiences and things of that nature. All right, I think I got that one done.
I have a question in regards
Sure,
to
Lucy. Sure,
okay.
Lucy. Yeah.
Did he, in regards to his sighting of the gray-like being in his home, did he describe any other sensory experiences? Like, sometimes you'll hear people describe gray-like beings as having like really oily skin or leaving like a sticky residue, and I know it touched him. Or did he describe any like smell or I'm just curious if there were any other details.
No, he didn't. He was 8 or 9 years old, so as a young man, he probably wouldn't pick up those scents. But no, he didn't. He didn't describe anything other than the gray with the black eyes, and so it kind of shocked him because he was expecting his father to be there, not the ET gray.
Sure. I was just curious.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I think a lot of people do. And I think the grays do have a kind of a odorous smell to them. That. And even in my case, my abduction, I had the grays there. I didn't smell anything either, other than they touched me. With the craft that close. No. Both of these cases, there was nothing physically wrong with them. I did ask, if they had any other dreams afterwards and things of that nature, and Esteban said no. And then I don't think Marilyn her name was Susan, excuse me. Susan didn't have any other experiences or dreams, but she was a Air Force. She worked a 20-year career in the Air Force. Susan did, and she was in nursing, in the medical field. So that's another thing about her, because she saw the helicopter. She thought it was a helicopter, like a medical helicopter, and the lights were really super, super bright. So that was to bring her attention, just like Esteban. All these things are all interrelated. And again, I think they trigger on one another as to, you need to look more into it. So, all right, next slide, Greg. Is everybody done with that?
I actually had a question related to, I believe it was Esteban. He was the one who had a father that was a pastor, right?
A minister, yes.
A minister. I noticed a detail that his father prayed over him nightly. Was that just a habit that his father had, or was there a condition that the young man had that?
At that time?
Yeah.
He just said I asked him, did he just bless you? He goes, yeah, he had concern for his son, and he just would always come over and just bless him, and I think he was fairly religious. I think it was more of a fundamental religion. And so his father would at times come over and he would wake up being touched by his father, be blessing him, which was very normal for him. He did that quite often. I don't know if it was daily. I wouldn't say it was daily, but he did it enough time that he remembered his father touching him quite often. And that's what he expected when he woke up that last time and he saw the gray. But the funny part of it was that he woke up, he said, I woke up twice. And again, he was I had to talk with him quite a bit, and he'd come out with other, this wasn't one time talking to him. I talked to him 4 or 5 times, and he would always add a little bits to it. And I'm sorry that Esteban wasn't here, because I told him to come on because he could answer more questions for himself about what was going on, and I think his family was very poor. But again, his parents were as such. And then he said the sofa was where he slept that night. And so, as you can tell, this was something of concern, his upbringing, his religious upbringing with him and things of that nature. But again, he's more science fiction. And then I think I talked with him a lot about the quantum and how things work with quantum principles, of how he could have an experience between the light when it was really dark and then the light, and which I just told you about, which he could have an abduction and missing time. And I don't know if that might have spooked him a little bit, and so I don't know. But he said, I'm not in the woo-foo, but he read what's the guy's name? Book, UFO of God of
Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah, Chris Bledsoe. So he read that book, so he understood that about abductions and there's missing time and things of that nature. So I think, again, if this is the first time going through stuff like this, that it takes time to understand what's going on with you and things of that nature. So everything good? Any other questions on these other two? Right. This is a gal named Marilyn. She's out of Wyoming. There, Cheyenne. And she reported this with Norfolk at one time, and you can see the description of the craft with the lights in each of the corners, and then a kind of chevron shape, but more as triangular, opaque lights. And again, those were the lights were like, I think I read to you that the lights protruded outward from the craft and were approximately 3 feet in diameter. There wasn't any center light, and the ends of the craft were not highly rounded, but were not exactly sharp edged either. So As you can read, it says craft was dark with 3 round opaque lights in the bottom, 1 forward light, and a light on each wing. It flew over the General Dynamics building there in Lincoln and turned above my hotel, and then it faded into the clouds. I'll tell you more about how exactly all it went on. So there's no sound at all at this time, enough to observe, but it was gone before I could videotape it. I wasn't scared by it because I remembered that the U.S. was working on a new aircraft, but this was certainly different. Next slide, Greg. Okay, I found this case to be that of a high interest, especially that it was an extremely close, if not in your face type of sighting with a triangular craft with 3 rather large external outward bulb-like circular white lights. This craft was first seen moving slowly over the General Dynamics building, and that it continued its westerly direction until it was almost directly overhead of the witness. The front end of the craft was pointed down towards her, thus flying, moving as if it was a winged craft. I would think that the craft was consciously aware of the witness below, since it stopped for some 1 to 2 minutes near the witness. I found it highly strange when the witness described the craft that when it stopped, that it hesitated. I don't know, that's another word that I'm going to talk about, hesitated. She then described when observing the craft and having 2 levels with a seam between the 2 levels. She said she thought the levels were about 4 feet in thickness. The craft's color was dark gray without any markings, and the backside edge wasn't straight but had that inner oval cut shape to it. She then stated the craft started to move away as it skimmed the rooftop of the motel, and then instantly did a 90-degree turn to the left, heading down south on a very rapid rate, disappearing into the low-level luminous cloud as if this cloud was a distortion portal of some sort. That's my take. She described the rear of the craft in that it had a shine to it. To that insight, I don't understand as of now. Next slide, Greg. As you can see, in the lower left, there's a big building. You can see Walmart. This is Superior Road, and then the next building over, Greg, that is the General Dynamics building. And straight down, Greg, is where she's staying at the motel. This is the road of Industrial Avenue. She was walking in this road coming up to the left of the building right there is where she was. Next slide, Greg. As you can see, here's General Dynamics building. So the aircraft or the craft was moving from right to left across the building, and she was, see where the road goes in between the Comfort Inn Suites, that little triangle there, or that little rectangular circle. She was about there, she said, when she saw the craft. She was walking up off of Industrial on the more towards the north of it, and then walking, and she walked up through this area. Then she caught from the side of her, she just says she caught something from the side of her eye, and she looked and she saw this craft coming. So next slide, please. So this is Maryland's view, and to the left is Superior Street, which is quite a rather busy street. You got Walmart in behind, and north of Walmart, there's a Sam's department store too. And then in 27th Street, as you know, 27th Street is another really busy street. So can you imagine standing there and seeing a triangular craft coming towards you and stopping, a couple of minutes right in front of her? She said the point was right at her, just stopping right overhead. And probably no more than 30 feet above her. And then she says that the craft banked and just kind of rolled across the top of the corner of the building, like she's like skimmed the motel, As you can see, the building of General Dynamics is one of kind of interest too. where they make rockets, and the rockets, the actual rockets cylinder aspect of it, and the gas tanks that go within the rockets themselves. So I found that, and of course, Marilyn's husband worked at Warren Air Force Base as working with the ICBMs, and she and her grandfather, the whole family's in the military with this construct, and they moved out to California at one of the other ICBM bases there, and then she went back to Wyoming, and there at the base there in Cheyenne, F.E. Warren, I think, Air Force Base. So she was driving she was actually on her way to Florida, and her first stop was at Lincoln. So she stayed at the Comfort Inn, and that's why she had her dog Snacks with her as well, and she was walking up the street with Snacks. And I asked, well, did Snacks have her respond to the craft? And she said, no, it was just doing normal dog things, And I'm like, why didn't the dog react if the craft was there, So go ahead and go to the next slide, Greg, if you would, please. So you can see to the right where Marilyn would be standing to the right by the bush, right behind the bush on that going to the motel. And that motel is the Comfort Inn. And this is Industrial Avenue, as you see. At the very end of Industrial Avenue was the hazy fog, or a fog cloud, where the craft, she said, she called it a luminous cloud. And I'm like, that's very strange. And it was low hanging too, very low hanging, almost just above the trees, And this thing took off, headed down Industrial Boulevard, and disappeared into the luminous cloud. That is highly strange in my constructing, So the dog didn't react, and then once she saw the craft disappear, she went back into the building, and she kind of just took it easy. I asked her, did she fall asleep or anything of that nature? She said no, and she just got up next day and drove off. And but it took her, I think, 11 days. She said she didn't want to talk to anybody about it, but what she just saw, and that it was 11 days later that she finally talked to one of her sisters about it, and they kind of bluntly just didn't believe her, but they accepted it, and that she did. And her husband thought, she talked to her husband later on, she thought it was some sort of other an air, a hover type craft, of some sort that came in, and of course he said, nah, that's not it, because I didn't hear any sound to it and things of that nature. So I just found that very, very intriguing. Marilyn said when she first saw it, she said that her heart dropped, and then that's when she got a grip on herself and decided to study the crafts. She said there wasn't much to see, dark gray with three lights, 3 feet in diameter with no noticeable markings. She said that at this point, I thought about the fact that the military is rumored to be building new aircraft, and then comforted herself, but with her thoughts of her Presbyterian faith. So the equilateral triangle must have sat there perhaps a full minute, wondering if she had been beamed up, or if those inside could have walked over to the lights in the floor. She stated the craft started to move and skimmed the hotel roof, and then made a sharp 90-degree turn to the left, and that's when it took off, heading down the Industrial Avenue to the south at a very fast rate. And then it had a shine to it. Says, I said, I found that the windows on the Industrial Avenue, which was a rather isolated street from the rather two busy streets nearby, there is Superior Street some 700 feet straight north, and 27 with 600 feet due west of the windows. Industrial Avenue becomes a dead end at some 1,300 feet, a quarter mile down from the location where the witness observed the point where the craft left, heading down Industrial and disappearing in the low-lying luminous cloud. And again, she said, I never expected to have this experience and that she wasn't even concerned that UFOs were real. She eventually told her husband that he thought the craft could have been one of these new hovercrafts, again, that uses air for a lift, but she thought that since there wasn't any noise or backwash, that couldn't be what her husband thought. She returned back to Cheyenne several weeks later, stopped at the same motel, and walked over and talked to one of the security guards there at General Dynamics. She told him that she had seen a strange aircraft going over their facilities back on January 28th. This is 2023. She said that the city and the National Guard often have aircraft in the area. She asked the if General Dynamics had cameras, and that she was hoping that she would be interested enough to check the dates. But he just got a little hostile, and she assumed that he was wondering what she was up to, and decided it was best to leave at that time. So she had enough gumption to go over there and ask the guard if he had seen that as well. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is another triangular craft, kind of chevron shape, but triangular. And this is the one Kyle had seen that was just down just on off Highway 370 and Cornhusker and Fort Crook Road. He said, this is Kyle saying, while out in the back of the department, I've observed coming overhead this boomerang craft moving from north to south direction. He stated it was foggy out, but there was an opening in the sky where he then very quickly observed the craft for no more than 10 seconds. The witness stated the craft was massive in size and the size of a $50 holding out your arm. He stated it was way up in the sky, but you could still observe this massive craft. He observed 4 white lights on the greenish surface of this craft, and then there was an aura that was around it and was greenish blue in color, and this aura tailed back behind it as well. As you can see, he says this is where the craft appeared. A stream of gray and blue aura surrounding the craft, and then saw the clearing, and that's where it exited the area. Though I thought too, from the aura of the green and blue hue surrounding the craft, different along with what he stated that there was some white in there too. I questioned him about the four lights that he had checked off that they were white in the CMS form. He stated there was white within the craft and that the surface was lead gray with some silver chrome to it. I definitely felt the witness was emotionally and if not spiritually taken by the sighting, and thus his reason for contacting MUFON. Next slide, please, Greg.
Build it. There you go.
Oh, there it is. You see the DIA garage right behind is another building, and the next building behind that is right where Kyle was. He had one of the apartments on this side of the, and you can see Cornhusker Road and Fort Crook Road. So he was standing out on the balcony taking a smoke break, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning that he saw this. So he said the craft swooped in for those 10 seconds and what really caught his attention was the massive size to it. He stated there was white within the craft, and the craft surface was gray with some silver chrome to it. So you can see what's going on with that. Next slide, Greg. As I sat with it, I had a conversation with Kyle, and we were at one of the burger shops. Trying to think the burger shop is Stella's. We ate Stella's that night. So as the witness sat there with Max and I, Max was one of our trainees. We observed some more of his drawings, which I found he was very quick with his drawings, and asked him if he ever thought about becoming an illustrator or a graphic designer. Also felt that the witness was highly creative in images and colors just came to him. He stated that yes, that this would be something more to what he would like to do. I asked the witness if he had any vivid dreams as a kid, and he stated yes, and that he would at time find himself in having out-of-body experiences. He stated that he could just relax and find himself out of body, and that it was highly interesting. That's when I asked him if he ever thought about taking up this study of remote viewing, only to tell him about those whom taught RV classes like that of Joseph Monteagle and that of Ed Dames and a few others. He found that quite intriguing. I told the witness that he was highly empathic, and his abilities of having out-of-body experience as a kid were excellent in becoming a good remote viewer. So here again, this individual, I felt, if he's had out-of-body experiences, that he's able to see things mainly more so on an intuitive level. And so the craft was basically kind of like he felt this was probably one of his most exciting times of seeing this craft, that there was something to it. So maybe this is another one where he probably could have had some hypnosis done. He thought about doing it, and that of other maybe some experiences that he's had earlier on. And then he lived up in Alaska, as a kid, and he was always out on his own, as a kid playing, and things of that nature. So very, very peculiar in his upbringing. And then also this craft. I missed the question that was up on the board that was earlier. What was it? I could look at it, I guess, myself. Chat. What was the site? Oh, sighting for Kyle's date. Kyle's date was 1/3/24, January 3rd of 24. Are there any other questions with Kyle? Kyle sighting? Okay. All right. Next slide, Greg. Now we come to some of my fun. And I was working with the one gal, Megan, down in Oklahoma. And then one of the other FIs, Oklahoma FIs, did the case, and her name was Marilyn Hudson. And she just became an ERT team member like myself. And so I talked with Robin or Megan and Marilyn. So Megan and Marilyn, I said, hey, let's read a book together. And so I said, because I think Megan was really interested in wanting to know more about her experience, and I'll tell a quick glimpse of what Megan's experience was. She was sleeping, and again, she was touched, and she woke up. I won't say where she was touched, but she was touched. She woke up and she saw and looked, and she saw the breastplate, a huge breastplate of this reptilian. Didn't see the head, but it was there right in front of her. So that would be quite frightening to wake up. And of course, the entity kind of disappeared right after that. And then so she wanted to know what was going on, and she'd tell her husband, and her husband said, didn't believe her. He says, quit, and asked her to quit talking about it because he didn't want to hear anything more about ETs. He didn't want to hear any more about UFOs. So he was totally not, she wasn't able. In fact, when I would talk with her, she would talk to me when her husband wasn't even in the house. So I had to catch her in between times because she didn't want him to hear what she was talking about, and he didn't want to hear anything of it. And her father was very religious, and he thinks all these entities and everything are just a bunch of demons, and so she doesn't have a very good support system. So I thought, well, here's Marilyn, and I thought Marilyn, she's just get into the ERT. She said she's had some experiences herself, and so I thought, why not get Megan and Marilyn talking about it, and maybe and get together so that she has some support. So we read this book, Beyond My Wildest Dreams, this is Kim Carlsberg. And Kim is one that, in her book, has had a lot of high recall of her conscious awareness of most of her ET experiences. That was due in part, she stated, that was due to her working more with her meditations and conscious recall. I have found that in my own experience that some folks have the beauty of having photographic memories or instant recall. And I think another friend of mine, since they have instant recall or photographic memories, they have more of a chance of remembering their encounters. In Kim's experience, I felt that the suppression of ET experiences come from, one, post-hypnotic suggestions from the ETs not to remember. Two, drugs that are being used. This is Kim's experiences where she felt why there is a suppression of ET memories. And I myself was regressed, and I felt the first thought came to me is, I'm not to remember. They were telling me not to remember my experiences. And the second thing she said that causes the suppression of ET experiences, of your ET experiences, drugs used during the medical procedures, along with other mind-altering drugs, especially during military abduction, which those of MK Ultra, mill labs, and experimentations with which the MK Ultra dealt with LSD mind control. And three, with the national suppression of your body and mental life defenses for protection. So the book to the right is her book about her experiences, and talking about Kim, she went out for a couple of years, went out on the road, and gave her talk to various different people at the different conferences. And after about 2 years, she went silent. She went crickets with everybody. She just disappeared from the scene. She came back about 8-9 years later, and then came out with this book, Close Encounters, as you see on the left there, which is artwork. And she came out saying that basically she felt the intuition that she needed to talk about it. She needed to let people know more about the abduction scenario. And so there she in this book, there's other people and their experiences, and highly illustrated. Kim was a she's a film photographer in Hollywood. She was one of the very first women to do working behind the camera and doing the videos, photography, cinematic photography in her art. And her first encounter was where she went home, and she kind of lived in San Francisco, and that was back in 1995, I believe so. I can't remember what year it was, but she had saw a light, and then the light jumped across the bay, and then the light came right straight forward to her, and then she was abducted and had an experience of the Greys. When you want to go to the next slide, Greg, I don't know what. And this is out of her book, and I'll just continue to read, and then we'll get to this part and understand what's going on here. She talked about various screen images which are cloaked or masked false illusions of the real ET standing in front of you, which comes in forms of animals, deer, owls, and many other animals, to loved ones, parents. And then she talked about times she didn't remember going to bed one night. In this experience, Kim remembers running and finding herself grabbing the handle of her runner Toyota, again, not knowing how she even got outside and onto the driveway. Again, she doesn't even remember being out on the driveway. And once she was out on the drive, she said now it was shrouded by this mysterious fog. And fogs are another one of those mysterious things that have ET encounters. She then saw this bright diffused light from above, where she then observed this wing-shaped craft. She prayed that she'd become invisible before the electric blue light captured her, which eventually surrounded her whole body and totally consumed her. She then found herself inside the Toyota where her husband's best friend was sitting beside her, only then to Kim in feeling a similar psychic manipulation where the friend tried to seduce her in having sex with him. Here again, Kim knew the ETs were using the boyfriend as a screen memory in having sex with her, which didn't work for the ETs that night. Kim talked about the use of implants, that of 1, used to locate the individual, 2, for listening and recording of the life of the abductee, 3, to raising the frequency of the individual as to shift them from one to another dimension, 4, to be used in creating paralysis in the individual. Kim always talked about the cold gurneys they were laying on, that the temperature was cold within the craft as well, much to the one encounter where she was taken and found herself on this gurney. There she observed this glass jar that was quickly in front of her, where she saw the jar filled with a water-like fluid in which included a very small fetus. Kim then felt her knees being moved apart, realizing she was going to be the host of the fetus. Here again, there was another picture of her that I should have shown in that, where she showed the fetus and her on the gurney, and that she was going to become the host for the fetus. Kim realized the reason that she had fear of having children now, definitely as a result of her many abductions, playing the mother surrogate with the alien hybrid program. And then she became aware that some women, that she found out they had short lifespans due to the excessive breeding, in which much she felt like that of dog breeders, where those female dogs are usually put to death in most cases. The body just plainly wears out. I have found out too that many women have early hysterectomies, if not finding feminine issues, in that of cancer, finding in their early exams of scarring of the uterus, and there were no other surgeries that had been performed with these such women. Kim talked about why are the ETs having this alien hybrid program. One is the case of cataclysms to the destruction of the earth, and then that of potential alien takeover of the earth. Another one of Kim's experience, soon after waking up from a sound sleep, she found herself in a small damp cellar that imprisoned her. Peering through the bars and the window nearby, she observed these military personnel scurrying around these rounded aircraft and performing routine maintenance checks. She then observed 3 flying saucers are hovering above her as if they were waiting for a signal to land, only then to see a pack of CIA goons that marched past the windows, soon busting into the room where she had no clue but to render herself unconscious. She awoke to where she felt she was inside a dorm room, a sterile confine with 2 standard Army-issued beds, only to observe another pale-looking woman nearby. They then were told that they were on Zeta Reticuli. That would be kind of crazy. They were now on Zeta Reticuli. She then became aware that they wanted to know the complete truth about something that they wanted to know, and they would be punished by an extended stay if they didn't tell them the whole entire truth. She then was moved, now sitting on a high back chairs on this dark surreal stage. A conversation was struck up with this salt and pepper haired mutated hybrid being she found repulsive, who was missing its entire upper lip. Finding out telepathically and hearing that crossbreeding of humans and greys often came with these unnatural deformities. The issue with Kim was that through her abduction, this had destroyed her trust in God, and now that her own country, she was decimated by the betrayal of the military, handing over to covert hybrid agents, and that the military and the aliens were having an ongoing relationship. Kim talked about another experience here where she observed a scenario being played out between these 2 bell-like crafts. She emerged from this experience not knowing if it was real or she emerged from the experience, not knowing if it was a real experience, a holographic projection, or another one of these psychic manipulations. She stated, excuse me, she stated that she was giving up and trying to tell the difference, though beginning to understand what the yogis have always have known. Life is really a dream, and that dreams are actually real. An enlightened soul realizes there's no difference. Though for Kim, the years of this cat and mouse play, she thought they would tire of the game and completely leave or come closer, but the game remains the same, that of a mystery. As you can see, this is where, in reading this is where Kim was brought in by one of her hybrids that she had on the craft, and this is what she depicted, called the Great Room. As my hybrid son walked me down the hallway with a blue neon light past the incubators in the house and housed the hybrid fetuses, we approached the double room with a white light streaming down in the window. Still naked, I was led through the doors and into the small circular balcony made of the white shiny metal. I gripped my hand around firmly around the handle to steady myself. I stood shocked, looking out into the room, the size of a school gymnasium, covered by a huge dome ceiling. Above me was a most incredible round window looking out into deep space. I had a thick frame of electric neon light with every color of the spectrum swirling and pulsating within it. It seemed to buzz with an energy. A translucent gazy veil poured down from the ring like an aurora borealis, and then electrified the room as it swirled around the tables on the floor. Below me were hundreds of tables with women laying on them. They were all laying on their backs, paralyzed and having babies removed from their bodies by the aliens. Still small grays were standing on the little triangular steps, while large praying mantis aliens were performing the procedures and seemed to be the doctors. They were removing the hybrid babies from the females, then putting them into the glass aquariums where there were tables with assortments of shiny instruments and banks of computers under the big rectangular windows. I made eye contact with one of the tall aliens. He seemed to disapprove of my presence. Just about then, my hybrid touched me again. Here's this touch aspect again on my elbow, and I became aroused. He led me back through the door and into the hallway. I was then escorted to a small room on the left. I soon realized it was the sperm collection room. So not only do women have issues, the men have issues as well of having encounters of sperm being taken from them, which I've had some dreams of that nature as well. Next slide, Greg.
It's working. There it goes.
And in this book, this is in her book, as you can see, of Close Encounters. These are some of the known ETs that people were having experiences, and this is what she labeled galactic family. Represented here are the few of the most commonly reported types of UFO occupants, and perhaps a few less common types. I've included a reptilian, as you can see there in the center, a praying mantis type, a Nordic female, a human-like male, possibly a hybrid, stocky blue being, short and tall beings called the Greys, an oriental-looking hybrid type, and a small greenish being with features of gray and reptilians. Encounters with UFO occupants or generally humanoid beings that seem to be associated with UFOs are a central part of the UFO mystery. For simplicity, I refer to these beings as alien. I know that some of the readers may object to the term, and I don't mean or distance the alien ourselves from the beings, but extraterrestrial usually implies an origin in other star systems when it may be more plausible that some of these beings come from the future or from a parallel quantum realities here on Earth, where the particular species of group of specials most often encountered. The term the Greys is the one that has stuck out. In truth, some of these beings are chalky, beige, white, tan, blue, gray, or grayish green. The ETs that I had, the grays that came to me, mine were the color of tan. We could also see them in gray, see the gray people, and the reptilians, the lizard people, to recognize them as non-human people. Nevertheless, gray brings to mind the large black eyes, bulbous heads, and the small bodies that characterize all the grays. So I feel the term is appropriate for our presentation of knowledge about these creatures. Zeta Reticuli commits us to a particular theory that of their origin that cannot yet be verified until a better term is found. I will call them the Greys. In the last paragraph, I said, I also believe in making, this is where she created the book. I also believe in making our findings widely available to the public as soon as possible, realistic images of the aliens and the potential to generate great interest in the alien presence. Thus, in turn, may help us to encourage intelligent discussions of phenomena by the general public, which may be a prerequisite in the phenomena receiving the serious scientific attention that it demands. So this is Kim Carlsberg. She was, again, noted way back in the 90s and early 2000s with her, when she first came out, and then eventually disappeared for 8 months because she was overwhelmed with all that's going on. Because people who do come out like this, I mean, they get hammered, you know, and people need to become more consciously aware of it. All right. Any questions on this? Kim's experiences, anything?
For Zeta Reticuli, do they have any planets in that solar system, or?
That I don't know, Kyle.
Yeah, but do people claim that there's planets out there, I guess?
That I don't know either.
Oh, okay.
We'll have to do some searching on the Zeta Reticuli then. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, no other questions? The next slide, please.
Can I interject for a second?
Sure, Mark.
Yeah. Regarding the Zeta Reticuli, I think, if I remember right, the work of Paul Hamden, I think he's out of Australia, and he works through a gentleman named William Trenet. I think they address the Zeta Reticuli, whether there's a planet there. Paul Hamden, I believe, if I recall, channels some entities through the Zeta Reticuli system, and you can get all of his books as PDFs. I think all you'd have to do is Google Paul Hamden. I think it's Hamden, and they have all their books as PDFs that you can get available. So that would answer that question.
Yeah, I was just curious because I don't think I've heard of any planets out there, but if like people predict it through these abductions or something, and then they find a planet there later on, that would be, super credible right there.
Yeah. I was going to say also, in Kim Carlsberg is narrated by Daryl Hannah, or I should say, Daryl Anka. Does anybody who knows Daryl Anka? He's Bashar. And so Bashar is noted to channel a very high gray being. And so I found that very, very interesting. Kim became good friends with Daryl Anka and asked him a lot of questions when she was going through all this stuff. So, but then Daryl Anka learned to become a channel and became Bashar. So I find that very fascinating. All right, this is when talking to Megan, she sent me this podcast by Simon Bound. His site is Alien UFO Podcast on Spotify, and I put it on Omaha UFO Study Group. I put the podcast of Simon Brown and this one gal named Camille James Harmon. And I got to know, so I found her, she's kind of the up and coming abductee, and actually she's been with MUFON, believe it or not. I'll just read this. Camille James Harmon, master's in Fine arts is a actress in UFO experiences. Her credits include Oscar-winning film Vice, which had to do with Dick Cheney. Funny how that worked out, for which she was interviewed as the advocate of her role as Mary Madeline. Her credits also include Shameless, the movie Shameless, and a Lifetime movie of Daughters and Deceit, and numerous other films, websites, commercial music videos. Harmon has executive produced an award-winning short film Terror de Oro. In 1992, she won the Stor Boone Award in New Orleans for best-selling supporting actress in the Playboy of the Western world. In 2022, she won 3 International Best Actress Awards for the short film Tiger Lily. And this is where she gets into where she moved from New Orleans to Los Angeles in 1995, and Harmon had her first UFO sighting. Abduction experience followed. She underwent hypnosis with Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith, which those two, Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith, are probably the top 2 regressionist therapists. So she's got the best of the best, which revealed medical experiences with presumed aliens and human military, as well as positive light beings of pure love. Harmon attended the 50th anniversary Roswell crash in 97, traveled to England in 1998 to see the crop circus. She wrote UFO magazine from 20 to 2024 or 2004, which allowed her to meet many legendary UFO researchers. She presented at MUFON Orange County. Here's where she gets into the MUFON. Presented at MUFON Orange County, Tucson, and Phoenix chapters, and has appeared as herself in several paranormal television shows. She has interviewed in Los Angeles and Times about her UFO experiences, lived in Los Angeles with husband, astrologer, and UFO experiencer Jeff Harmon. Camille James Harmon is a founder, a member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Again, some of that is being covered up. Is her website and things below, so that's okay. Next slide, please. So, again, I'm just going to kind of read what we'll be done with this then. This is where picture of her on the left where she went to contact in the desert. Again, one with Linda Moulton Howe, and then she had some experience, another experience of hers where she went to Chris Blesso and talked to Chris about what she was experiencing. So she's been through the gambit with the higher ups here, and Forte understand quite a bit. I said I became aware of the Camille Harmon through Megan from Oklahoma, who I had the pleasure of speaking with one of my recent ERT cases. She sent me this link. And then she was with the movie of Vice, which was part of Dick Cheney, who came involved in the Vice. Again, Cheney was the CEO of Halliburton, which was the company who was given the contract to rebuilding Iraq. Funny thing about Camille Harmon that she was an adopted child, and had an uncle who worked alongside NASA as a mechanical engineer under Werner von Braun on various moon projects. Camille lived with his uncle a few years and felt that she was taken by the folks of the military-industrial complex, the MIC. She stated she read books by Whitney Strieber, which she stated drew red flags for her, and that she had weird anxiety. This is another thing which I found out from David's, in my case, with Megan, with Lori in Iowa. These gals have high level anxiety, and Megan has high level anxiety too. And again, I think, and then talking with Lori and saying that these are real experiences, and that you're not, and she was always told by her whole family that, you know, you're being crazy, and finding out too that Lori wanted to find out about her experiences a little bit more, and she was kind of scared of the aliens, that she might be harmed. So when she went into the hospital, she went in there saying, like, I'm scared, I feel like I'm, that the alien's going to hurt me. She was talking about them, and of course, what did the hospital do? They threw her in a psych ward for a week. And they ran tests on her for the week, and she was found having a clear slate, not having any psychotic symptoms whatsoever. So whatever she's experiencing is real. And she said that it lifted a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings off her shoulder, at that time, and things of that nature. So, if you don't get involved in understanding, that's why I kind of wanted to press it a little bit today, that when you deal all the F5s, MUFON F5s, and you need to deal with people with these cases, that you need to talk with them with a soft tone and understanding that these are real and not fake and phony and things of that nature. So with a tender glove, please do so. So then she stated she read books by witness history which drew red flags for her, and that she had weird anxiety. She later stated that she observed one evening a black triangle craft and reported it to MUFON. She had the experience of sleep paralysis, only then to have a voice, that of a mechanical voice of AI, that called her name out, only then to see a gun in her face. So that was the one that she got her to get into MUFON. Camille says she was down in Sedonia at this Oak Creek location. She had an experience there, and that's where she got with Barbara Lant and doing a regression session with her. She then stated in this experience she observed this blue beam of light. Just talk about me, Kyle and and Dave. I always talk about my blue beam of light that pulled her up and out of the house. Exactly what happened to me. Observing a white misty fog all around her, she stated she felt frozen, and then her knees going apart, having a feeling of terror, this primal fear. She then stated that this thing extracted an alien fetus from her. She stated the grays that she observed had a triangular emblem on the chest. So the grays, she observed this triangular circle emblem, circumvented the triangle on the chest of these grays. She eventually confided with her family about the ET abduction. Now, this is where, again, I find fascinating. It's kind of jokingly, but she went to her family, talked to her family about her abduction, only for her mother in telling her, "Why don't you come out gray? Why don't you come out? You're gay like your brother, so I can deal with this much easier." So this is her mother telling her, jokingly, "Why don't you just come out saying that you're gay like your brother?" Again, they don't believe in these experiences. Camille wanted to have all her amalgam mercury fillings replaced one time as to look better with her actress work. She went into the dentist and told him that she was an abductee, an ET abductee, and believe it or not, she said that the dentist was okay with it because he knew of that aspect. And then she told the dentist that some of the ETs have flashbacks of their abductions, as for the dentist to be aware of. Everything went well until a week later. One of the new fillings was highly sensitive to everything. So she called up the dentist again and let him know that one of the tooth was highly sensitive. So the dentist told her to come back in, and where the dentist drilled down and hit a very hard substance which she couldn't drill through, in which the dentist said that this object was not there prior to her previous work. Once again, Camille went to Barbara Lamb and had another hypnotic regression. This is where she felt as if she was drugged. Once she got into hypnosis, she said she felt like she was drugged. She heard this voice telling her she was a troublemaker. And then she saw these humans who placed her in this helicopter from this hangar, which was then taken back to her house, only to find out that the recording of her hypnosis session with Barbara did not record for some reason. This is where Camille really feels that she was working with the MK Ultra boys. The reason why Camille got in touch with Chris Blessel was because during the earlier days of her ET encounter, she started to was in denial of all of her experience, and that all the UFOs were demonic, and thus got into Christianity for her own sanity. She stated she talked to Chris about the time she had a sighting with the orbs, where she heard this owl, only to be touched on the neck. Again, here's the touch. Saw the owl, which is a screen memory, and in the orb. Chris Blitzel told her that angels come to you via these orbs. Camille then had another regression where she was found herself going into the void, where she's from the orbs, where she saw these white light beings. She called them ascended masters. This is where she said that these are the masters of great love. And then the ascended masters, they all had beards. She felt that from the encounters of these loving beings that she was back home, and this is where she wanted to be. So in coming in contact with these ascended masters, she finally found that she felt akin to these higher stated beings, and that this is where she found to be home to be. She asked the beings why she was here on Earth, and she was told that she was to fight evil. She was to continue with her acting career as to meet up with as many people and telling them of your encounters. That these bearded beings told her that they would be lining her up with folks that she would meet, which came true in her role with Vice. So here again, she went to regression, found out these ascended masters were with the beards were kind of like guides, that she felt very much at home, and that Chris Bledsoe said these were the angels, so to speak, coming in the orbs. And so there's a combination between orbs and now that we have the orbs, and supposedly in the New Jersey, when they first started seeing the orbs in New Jersey, they called them orbs, and then soon thereafter they turned to drones. That are all drones, and so I think the military industrial complex got in there and started to mimic, the orbs of that time. So I found this is one woman that you can look up to. She's part of MUFON. She's she started. I think she started wanting to become an FI, but I don't think she did. But anyway, any other questions? If not, that's my take. Sure show, Greg.
All righty. UFO, UAP news highlights. This one was a little bit follow up on the Chinese spy balloon, that it was loaded with American technology from several companies in America. One of them is an iridium burst transmitter that it had on it. And of course, it was kind of interesting that they kind of just took a bunch of technology, American technology, put it together in the Chinese balloon. This one's a kind of an AI representation of an egg in a cargo net being hauled by a helicopter. I have the video here, but it's a little long and we won't have time to show it. But it was on YouTube, and it was a MUFON investigators, Mark D'Antonio and a couple others, Chris DiPerno, a couple others that had their take on it and what on the video itself, not on what Jake Barber, the whistleblower, was saying, but on the take itself. Oops, let's get back here. Now this one was I'll kind of play it because it's see what we can get. Yeah. This was a Nebraska sighting that's represented in this video, and it's something we've talked about a long time ago. It happened out in western Nebraska, but I'll just play that.
In America's Great Plains states, UFO sightings have been occurring for well over a century and a half, with cowboys and farmers going on record as witnessing bizarre and mysterious occurrences. Here we look at two still unexplained reports from some of those 19th century witnesses. The vanishing. Strange airborne craft seen in the sky first became known as flying saucers in the late 1940s, but long before that, the distinctive saucer shape was spotted, as on Friday, June 6, 1884. A cowboy named John W. Ellis and 3 others were doing an annual roundup of cattle on a remote ranch, which was about 35 miles northwest of Benkelman, Nebraska. The cowboys later reported that they had seen a flying saucer crash into a nearby ravine. The incident was covered in 2 local newspapers of that time, both the Nebraska Nugget and the Daily State Journal of Lincoln, Nebraska. Describing the area where the crash occurred, the Nugget reported that the surrounding country was rather wild and rough, with roads barely more than trails. The men's cattle roundup was suddenly interrupted when they heard, quote, a terrific whirring noise in the sky above them, and looking up, observed a blazing streak of light shooting downwards towards the ground. They later described the object as a cylindrical airship, which was about 50 or 60 feet long and 10 or 12 feet wide. It appeared to be composed of an unfamiliar metal, which they later realised was extremely light. The blazing cylinder had struck the earth some distance away from the cowboys, who were unable to see exactly where it had crashed, as it had plummeted into a deep ravine. Ellis, a well-known ranchman, and his men turned their horses and took off in search of the crash site, which moments later they found. The newspapers reported that they discovered wreckage of a very strange appearance. Perhaps describing the debris in terms familiar to people of the day, they related that they found fragments of cogwheels and other bits of machinery lying on the ground and which had been scattered in the path made by the fallen object. These fragments were glowing with heat so intense that the grass was scorched for a long distance around each piece, making it impossible for anyone to approach it. Further description was provided about the wreckage that one piece looked like the blade of a propeller, appearing made of metal like brass and about 16 inches wide, 3 inches thick and 3.5 feet long. It was later picked up with a spade and found not to weigh more than 5 pounds, although appearing as strong and compact as any known metal. A scrap from a seeming wheel, which had a milled rim and would have had a diameter of 7 or 8 feet, was also retrieved. This appeared to be made of the same material and also had the same remarkable lightness. Interestingly, other reported UFO crashes occurring many decades later often involved descriptions of extremely light metals. As an example, in the alleged 1947 crash of a UFO near Roswell in New Mexico, witnesses reported seeing pieces of a metal that was very lightweight and flexible, but also very strong. After observing the crash, the 4 cowboys rode closer to the still-burning object, reaching the edge of the deep ravine into which it had fallen. They tried to make out what it was, but the heat was so intense that the air around it was virtually on fire and emitted a light so dazzling that the human eye could not view it for more than a second. One of the cowboys, named Alf Williamson, dismounted and approached the wreckage site. Coming to within 200 feet of the blazing morass, he raised his head over the edge of the ravine, but within 30 seconds he collapsed senseless from gazing at it from too close a proximity. His hair had been, quote, singed to a crisp, and his face become covered with blisters. The injured man was dragged away from the blazing hot area and conveyed to Alice's house, where he was cared for until a physician arrived to treat his wounds. His condition was assessed as serious, and his brother in Denver was summoned by telegraph. His experience is one of the first accounts of someone being harmed during a UFO encounter, and although his injuries were described as heat-related, radiation may have also been involved. Others who approached the wreckage may have later suffered radiation-related illnesses and even death. Observing from a safe distance, the remaining cowboys noted that the ground around the UFO had been strangely impacted by the crash. The Nebraska Nugget reported that when the object first touched the earth, the ground had been sandy and bare of grass. Now the sand was fused molten to an unknown depth, covering a space about 20 feet by 30 feet, and the melted substance was still bubbling and hissing. There were several similar spots where it had hit the ground, also so affected. It should be remembered that the only air travel known in 1884 was in hot air balloons, contraptions that had no engines and few mechanical parts. It is unlikely that the crash of a balloon would have caused such extreme heat or radiation, or would have scattered so many pieces of strange metallic machinery all around the crash site. Another incongruity was the intense light that continued to shine long after the crash. Come nightfall, many residents of neighbouring ranches ventured to the crash site to see the mysterious object, but for even hours after it fell, the light emitted was still too bright to view directly. The newspapers likened it to the blazing rays of the sun, so way too powerful to be endured by human eyes. The following morning, June 7, 1884, the crash site was again visited by many locals, among them E.W. Rawlings, an inspector of cattle brands for the area's ranches. While the wreckage had by then cooled somewhat, it was still too hot to touch. After inspecting the crash site, Rawlings went to the nearby town of Benkelman, Nebraska, and evidently verified that everything Ellis and the other cowboys had claimed was true. While they waited for their amazing find to cool off so they could examine it, Ellis attended the land office to secure the area on which the strange object lay so that his claim to it was beyond dispute. However, disappointingly, in its June 10, 1884 edition, the Daily State Journal reported that the crash debris was, quote, gone, dissolved into the air. A massive rainstorm had fallen the day before, causing all but the paper's correspondent to flee. He waited to see the effect of the torrential downpour upon the glowing mass of metal. The blinding storm lasted for just half an hour, and when it died down so that the UFO should have been visible, it was no longer there. The runoff was 3 feet deep in water, and so, supposing that the strange vessel had floated away, the news team crossed over at the risk of their lives and were astounded to observe that the bizarre object had melted, dissolved by the water as if made of salt, with scarcely a skerrick of it remaining. Small jelly-like pools lay around in various spots on the ground, but before the eyes of the onlookers, these became thinner and thinner until they merged with the muddy storm water. Strangely, the air was pervaded by a faint sweetish smell. Some skeptics insist that this UFO crash is falsely identified because one witness suggested that the wreckage included fragments of cogwheels, which were common machinery mechanisms in the 19th century. However, researchers maintain that he may have just had no other way to describe it. As concluded by the 1884...
Anyway, that we're running out of time here, but that essentially the end of it. It just washed away. This month's MUFON Journal, upcoming events. The next meeting, that should say March 15th. It's not same time. The Nebraska Iowa meeting is going to be a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, Zoom only.
And then the Iowa meeting will be on March 8th at West Des Moines Library from noon to 2. And Kyle, you want to finish this off or whatever?
I mean, that'll be the end of the meeting, but I was wondering, at your last Iowa meeting, did you get any insight into that metal thing or whatever with Lori?
I haven't had the last one, Iowa meeting was before our last Nebraska Iowa meeting. I haven't
I thought you were going to do one.
I'm going to do one March 8th, but no, I haven't been able to get a hold of that particular witness. And I don't know if I'll be able to or not. Hopefully.
Okay, I thought it was, I guess I mixed it up. I thought it was February 8th you were doing the meeting or something.
Oh, yeah.
Which would have been last week. So yeah, March 8th.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I just heard, I saw John McLaren put a Wikipedia note out there and saying it was a hoax and said it was a meteorite. But wouldn't meteorites cause a crater a little bit bigger if it's still glowing and stuff like that?
Yeah.
No, it's worth looking into.
Yeah,
Uh,
that episode, I can't remember which show it was. I know Greg, you mentioned it. They said that there was like a flame that was on the ground for an extended period of time. And so they felt that was part of it that really was difficult to explain as being a meteorite or anything else. So just because of the brightness and the length of time.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I would think if it was a meteorite, it would cause a crater of some sort if it's still fairly large. I mean, it's going to be quite a crater. So I don't know if that would, they're trying to explain it, explain it with one reason, logic. What did you think, John? Do you have any insight to that? Since you brought it up?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
we can hear it.
No, I always like to research things. So I was just did a Google search and
Oh, yeah.
that came up, and a lot of the details are in there that was mentioned. It said Dundee County and talked about the cogwheels and pieces of
really?
machinery and
Yeah, I looked
stuff.
it up too quickly.
But in there they call it a meteor, immense meteor. Maybe they didn't know. I mean, back then didn't know that the aliens crashing.
True, but again, I said I didn't. They didn't talk anything about a crater, or it just was on the surface. It would at least have an impact if it's coming in, skipped or did something, But well, again,
It depends on what the meteor's made out of. What the content is.
and how I don't know how large how large a piece it was, vice versa, and it was glowing and so bright. I don't.
Found a cylinder tube, 50 to 60 feet long. So that kind of matched what was mentioned also.
Okay.
Tube. Sounds like
More,
it was manufactured.
True.
All right.
More to yak about.
Mhm.